Hey, what's going on, roleplayers? It's the Bard here, and welcome back to the corner. It's time to continue our rogue analysis by going over the roguish archetypes from the player's handbook. So today we're covering Thief, Assassin, and Arcane Trickster. So as if rogue wasn't powerful enough, we still have to include the archetypes. And some of these are actually really good in and of themselves. So there's some really strong abilities in Thief. Starting off with Fast Hands, which allows you to use your cunning action to make sleight of hand checks for your thieves tools when disarming traps or opening locks, or to take the use an object action. For anybody who cannot see the value in this, I feel really sorry for you. This ability is one of, if not the strongest, in the entire Thief archetype. Use an object encompasses so many different things. It can be closing doors, it can be setting off traps, it can be using certain items, it can be spreading caltrops, it can even be certain magical items, depending on whether or not they actually require an action. Being able to take what is essentially a normal action and condense it down to a bonus action and still get in a complete turn is unbelievable. Other examples of this could be making a bluff to get someone to look away, and then you can quickly use a bonus action to poison their food. Perhaps you don't want someone to walk into a trap, you need to run up there and quickly disarm it. Perhaps there's a trap that goes off itself and you need to escape it, so you can unlock the door and quickly get out before it crushes your entire party. Whatever the action is, whatever the additional thing is that you need, you can still take all these actions as well as having a use an object action on top of it as well. The harsh reality of it is, if you cannot find a use for use an object, unlock, or disarm as a bonus action, then you're not doing Thief right. So just to clarify for you new players, there is a section in the DM's guide that says if a magical item requires an action to activate, you can't use other bonus actions in order to activate it, and they use the Thief as a specific example. If an item requires an action to activate, that action isn't a function of the use item action. So a feature such as the Rogue's Fast Hands can't be used to activate the item. And this is on page 141 if you want to look it up yourself. So second story work means that you can climb without using additional movement, and it also makes your jumps increase by a number of feet equal to your dexterity modifier. Now I'm just going to get this out of the way right here, right now. Those of you planning on playing some kind of Assassin's Creed game as Altair or Ezio Auditore, you go for Thief. As tempting as it might be to go for Assassin, you go for Thief because you can climb and sprint and run and jump and do all that parkour stuff with absolute ease. This is the ability that you need. So advantage on your sneak rolls for just moving at half the speed, as well as having a high dexterity, proficiency in sneak, and probably having expertise in it as well. If anything can find you, I would be surprised. I mean, chances are you're going to be going slowly anyway. If you're trying to infiltrate, avoid the patrols, evade capture, most of the time you're going to be going slowly, checking the corridors, looking when it's safe. It's only if you have to, say, keep track of someone and keep up the pace along with them, and you want to remain out of sight as well at the same time, that's when you might need to use your regular speed. So for the most part, you can use this all the time. And that's something I like about the ability. Any ability that I can use all the time is a good ability in my book. Use Magic Device at level 13, and again, it's another one of those absolutely ridiculous abilities that's just far too good. So you ignore all race, all class, all level restrictions on all magic items. You have the entire DM's guide at your disposal. Oh look, there's a item over there specifically for elves. Oh, I'll take that, says the elf, and it's like, well, you know, can we negotiate over that? Because I might want it as well. And it's like, yeah, but you're a gnome. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't matter because use Magic Device. I can use it anyway. This is the ability that allows you to keep up with the spellcasters. In any game, spells make the game very, very unbalanced, no matter how much you try to put a cap on it. So just being able to have magical items that you can use to make various effects and not have to worry about whether or not they're actually intended for you makes you so versatile in any number of situations. This is a great ability. Consider also items that require an action to use but don't specifically state it in their item description. Those are the items that you can use with your fast hands, and if they're also class, level or race restricted, that's not going to be an issue for you either. And finally at level 17 you get Thief's Reflexes. If my microphone wasn't attached to a stand, I would be dropping it right about now. You get 2 turns during the first round of any combat. No per rest, no short, no long rest, no cooldown, no nothing. If it's a combat, you get 2 turns at the beginning. End of. One at your normal initiative and another one at -10. So 2 turns during the first round of any combat. That can be 2 attacks, which will both have sneak attack because they're 2 separate turns. That's also 2 moves, and it's also 2 cunning actions as well. So open lock, disarm trap, or use an object action. Twice. And as we've already discussed, certain magical items can be used with it. Not all, but at least there are some. It's kind of like having a discount version of Time Stop that you can use at the beginning of every combat. And that's just ridiculous. So next up is Assassin, and it starts out okay, but it's not an amazing class in my opinion. It does have some good features, but I think they are more geared towards social campaigns that are less about adventuring and more about politics, social, and influence. So I would consider going with Assassin if you are considering going into a campaign like Greyhawk or Kingdoms of Calamar. So the first thing that you get as an assassin is the bonus proficiencies. It's very easy to not even notice this and just mentally skip over it to the Assassinate ability, but you have these bonus proficiencies for a start. Now, it's in addition to the extra stuff that you can get from your backgrounds. So certain backgrounds might allow you these proficiencies, but you don't have to take those. You can have other proficiencies as well. So it should be your first indication that this is a subtle skill. So you get proficiency with Disguise Kit and with Poisonous Kit. Now in this edition, not having a proficiency doesn't preclude you from using it. However, having those proficiencies just mean you're better at it. So what they're trying to say is they want you to be better at disguises and they want you to be better at poisoning. Very subtle skills, not necessarily for immediate effect, but for slow over time effects. Things that you're using to influence what's going on around you, things that you can put into action and then the effect comes along later sometimes. It's not always about instantaneous and direct, sometimes it's about subtle and over time. So with Assassinate, you're getting advantage on attack rolls against any creature that hasn't taken a turn yet, and in addition, any hit you score against a creature that is surprised is a critical hit. Your DM won't always allow you to be surprising things, and the fact is, this ability relies so heavily on the fact that you can surprise a target in order to have anything resembling a decent effect. It's okay, but I just can't see enough practical use in it that I could use it over and over again. And as I've said before, the more you can use something, the better its value is. I can only use this at the beginning of an encounter, and the problem with it is, I can't guarantee that I'm going to get a surprise action. Another thing, but it's something that I just want to cover maybe in a later video on gaming morals and gaming ethics, is most of the time, as an adventuring party, you're not going to be going for surprise, you're not going to be stabbing people in the back. In fact, most of the time, combat brings with it a very real risk of serious injury or death. Any combat that you can avoid, any combat that you can talk your way out of, any combat that you can just plain not be in, you can still earn experience for dealing with creatures, just not having to murder everything in sight. And that's the other thing. This ability relies on you going for what is essentially a stab in the back. It's pretty good for new players, I won't deny that. I just think that as we progress, as we get more experienced, we change the way we roleplay. In many cases, you might have role-playing games where even a dice doesn't get rolled for 3 or even 4 sessions. So if there's no combat, you really can't use this ability. At the same time, you might want to try to avoid combat in as many different ways as possible. The wizard might have an invisibility spell that they can use. Perhaps the ranger can follow some certain tracks and find hidden doors, which you can then bypass certain encounters with. All these kinds of abilities that you can use to get around combat. But the assassin is absolutely geared towards getting that first strike, and without that first strike, without that surprise, his abilities become useless. As ridiculous as it might sound, as we get more experience with role-playing, we start to identify which encounters are worth our time and which are not. Most of the time we'll talk our way out of or move around or circumvent an encounter that we don't necessarily need to fight, But if we are forced to fight, mostly it's because we don't have a choice in the matter, and there's almost no way you're going to get a surprise in such a scenario. The only real use for Assassinate, the majority of the time, is if you are deliberately out to kill someone, either for profit or because the situation absolutely demands it. The ability isn't terrible, but it only really shines if your GM allows you lots of surprises and lots of opportunities to surprise targets. However, the satisfaction in the game truly comes from when you're overcoming adversity, not having an easy kill in front of you. Infiltration Expertise is another one of those abilities that specifically gears itself towards long-term political deep immersion role-playing. Understand that this ability takes a week for it to actually come into effect. It costs you 25 gold pieces to establish things like your history, your profession, your affiliations for your new identity, and you can use it to acquire appropriate clothing and letters of introduction and official looking certification. So it's good, but again, it lends itself to the kind of game where you're going to be working in an area for a long period of time. It takes a long time to set up, and it takes an additional amount of time where you can really take advantage of it. It's one where you're digging in for the long haul. The best part of this ability, however, is that you can don that disguise and no one will be able to see through it. That's who you are, as far as everyone else is concerned. There's no two ways about it. It's not a case of people seeing through your disguise, it's who you are. When a guard comes around the corner saying, "Oh, excuse me, Mr. X, have you seen someone dressed in all black running this way? They are wanted for a murder." You just say, "No," and then move on. And then you can strip off your disguise and move around as you normally would. Very useful ability, good get out of jail free card as well. But at the same time, you do need to invest money, you do need to invest time. It might even be worth having a couple of different personas that you can jump into. If something goes terribly wrong and the finger is pointed at one of your personalities, having a second or even third that you can fall back on can potentially save you bacon. So next up is Imposter, and in order to make it work you need to spend at least 3 hours interacting with the individual you're trying to imitate. For the most part, I can't stand people for more than 3 minutes. And the sad thing is, you can get Actor really early in the game, which allows you a similar ability that only takes a minute of preparation. Even the Mastermind has a similar ability that allows you to pass off as a native speaker. You can't exactly imitate them, but you can at least seem like you come from that area. As for imitating people's behaviors, well, isn't that what performance is for? It's not just singing and dancing, it's imitating behaviors, it's acting as well. And when you're acting, you're taking on a new persona. Everyone knows that. It's just another way of doing the same thing, just without having to make a check. The same is true for the handwriting aspect of this ability. That's what forgery is for, to make something look convincing, like forging people's signatures or forging people's handwriting. The only thing that's really good about this ability is it doesn't require you to make any kinds of checks, and it really works at best when you're under some kind of scrutiny. So normally when you're doing forgeries or stuff like that, you're not going to be in an area where people are watching you. That makes this ability better in that respect, but again, it's so situational that it really isn't of any value when you compare it to a few feats and a few skills that you can do to get the exact same thing. And finally, at level 17, the assassin gets Death Strike. So when you attack and hit a creature that is surprised, oh wait, yeah, surprise, we've been over this one already, haven't we? So the target has to make a saving throw, and if it fails, it takes double damage. So at the point you get this, at level 17, you've already got 9d6 additional damage. The ability requires you to hit a surprise creature, so your Assassinate automatically works, so that ups it to 18d6 additional damage, plus your weapon, plus your ability score, and a few other bits and pieces. And then, once all that's been calculated, if they fail their save, all the damage doubles, which is very, very strong. However, all it does is double the damage on that one attack, and you can only use it once. And we've already gone over how unrealistic in terms getting consistent surprise attacks is, as well as the fact that at that level certain creatures are going to be much more resistant when it comes to their saves. It's a hard ability to get to actually work. Not only do you need the right setup, but powerful creatures that are there to provide a challenge will be making their saves so much more often than the creatures you're fighting at lower levels. For me, there's just too many requirements, not enough instances in which I can use it, and too many easy ways out of getting this ability to work. So for me, this ability is a non-starter. Now I expect you guys didn't want to hear that about the Assassin, but these are the unfortunate truths, and that's what I'm here to tell you. This isn't a completely useless archetype, but I need you guys to understand that it's not really an adventuring archetype. It's one that relies on social situations, that relies on you being in cities, that relies on you establishing yourself in the long term. The abilities are good to a degree, but they don't allow themselves to be useful in a variety of situations. It's a class that has a very specific skill set. I would probably say the Assassin is an archetype that is more geared towards more advanced players because of the amount of investment, the amount of time, the amount of planning that really goes into a lot of the abilities. And perhaps consider the fact that if you're going to be in a scenario where you're going to be using multiple identities, imitation, these require a lot of on-the-spot thinking as well as a lot of in-depth planning beforehand. And they're not easy things to pull off. So Arcane Trickster is one of those archetypes that, in my opinion, it seems to be trying to do a little bit of everything, but overall ends up doing pretty much nothing. So the first thing for the Arcane Trickster is the spellcasting. Have a look at your Arcane Trickster spellcasting table. You know enough spells, but at 3rd level you get some 1st level spells. At 7th level you get access to 2nd level spells, and at 13th level you get access to 3rd level spells, and it's not until level 19 that you actually get access to a 4th level spell, and you still only get 1 of those per day. You're also limited to only being able to pick from illusions or enchantments, except at level 8, level 14 and level 20. At these levels you'll be able to pick from any school, but for the most part it'll be illusions and enchantment. Enchantment is usually mind-affecting based spells, and there are so many creatures that actually just have blanket immunity to it as you progress through the levels. Also, things like True Seeing completely wipe the floor with most types of illusion spells. So already you're at a major disadvantage. You're good in the beginning, but you have low-level spells, and not that many of them, and most of them aren't going to be of that much value as you progress in levels. So Mage Hand Legerdemain is for stowing or retrieving objects in containers carried by or worn on characters. So basically it's for pickpocketing at range, and even then it's not that useful. You can also use it for thieves' tools at range, for things like disarming traps or opening locks. So it does have the slight benefit of having what is a pseudo fast hands about it, because you can use it as a bonus action. However, you still need to cast it beforehand, which is an action. Unless you've already precast it, and it only lasts a minute, and then you find yourself in a situation where you can quickly use it as a bonus action, then great. But again, it's too situational. Still, being able to use these abilities at range does give you a certain advantage, and it keeps you away from dangerous traps. It's especially useful for disarming, and if you do happen to fail and set it off, at least you're not going to be in the vicinity when it happens. Magical Ambush is probably one of the better abilities for the Arcane Trickster. At level 9, your target gets disadvantage on any saving throw it makes against a spell you cast when you're hidden. The creature only has disadvantage, however, for the turn in which you cast it, so look for spells that only allow 1 saving throw. Good examples of a spell that only allow 1 save are things like Charm Person, Suggestion, or Hypnotic Pattern. Also, when it comes to your ability to select spells from other schools, again, it's worth considering the spells that only allow 1 save. Considering you only have a very limited amount of spells per day, you need to make the absolute best use you can out of every single one of them. Versatile Trickster is really a terrible ability. It allows you to have advantage by using a bonus action, as long as you already have Mage Hand cast. But there are so many more practical ways of getting advantage. If you're hidden from the creature and you attack, if you're flanking with one of your party members and then attack, whatever, there's just so many better ways of getting advantage. I would say the golden rule in this scenario is if you're not positioning your character in the right place, then you're not doing rogue right. And finally, Spell Thief. It's one of those abilities that I want to like, but unfortunately, it's just mechanically very, very poor. So when a creature uses a spell, you can force it to make a saving throw, and if it fails, you get the spell, but it has to be of a level that you can cast. So it has to be somewhere between a 1st level spell and possibly a 4th level spell at level 19. This ability might be useful against something like Paladin or Ranger, someone that has very, very low level spells. However, most of the time, their spells usually affect themselves to make their combat abilities more effective. Other characters that have spells include wizards and sorcerers, but by the time they hit level 17, they're going to be throwing around meteor swarms and time stops and foresights, and basically if you're not throwing meteor swarms at your enemies, you're probably not doing sorcerer correctly. There are situations in which you could use this ability, but for the most part, you're going to find that if you do come up against a serious spellcasting character, you're probably better off with going with Dispel Magic or Counterspell. Trying to Spell Thief someone, especially a high level sorcerer, you're just going to end up a squishy mess on the floor somewhere. Arcane Trickster leans towards fancy abilities that allow you to have a little bit more ease in the sort of general stuff that a thief should be doing. But there's too much messing about with mage hands and too many parlor tricks for my liking. I don't feel like a real spellcaster. I feel like someone who's more of a dabbler in cantrips, because most of the time your abilities are too low, your spells aren't strong enough, and everything you do just seems really weak in comparison, and you're really limited in the amount of spellcasting progression that you have. It's not that it's a terrible class, it's just you need to be really smart with it. I don't mean really smart. Otherwise you're not going to get anything out of it. You have to take advantage of all the very simple things like invisibility with sneak attack or suggestion with your magical ambush, just so that you can get around some of the more basic things. When you hit level 14 and you can choose from any school, it might be in your best interest to pick up a painfully restrictive decent curse. Bestow Curse is probably one of the better choices, in fact, because you'll be able to cast it. Chances are they might only get one save depending on what your DM decides, and you'll be able to inflict disadvantage with it as well. This is going to be one of your primary things that you'll have to do in order to really take advantage of your spellcasting capacity as an Arcane Trickster. Other than that, the archetype is just filled with little tricks to get you in and out of situations that you could probably get in and out of with just a little bit more thought and a little bit more effort. There seems to be good and bad in all the archetypes, particularly when it comes to Rogue. However, with the Rogue class itself being so powerful, the lack of ability in some of the archetypes isn't as big an issue as it might first appear. With most other classes, the archetypes really define what that character can do and what that character can really achieve. But with the Rogue, the archetypes are really just some spice to an already formidable character class. The abilities you have just as a rogue easily compensate for some of the weaknesses you have in your archetypes, so it's not a big loss, and in fact it just adds a little bit of character and flavour, and that's all it really needs to do. The actual rogue itself, really strong, really good, and lots of options within it. It's just unfortunate that some of the archetypes really don't hold up when you look at them in close detail like we've done today. So guys, what are your thoughts on the roguish archetypes? Comments down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.